Good evening. We're back with another episode of the Lord of the Rings LCG Progression Series. And tonight is a card review of Fire in the Night, the third adventure pack of the Arid Mithrin cycle. Let's take a look. The hero is Thranduil, 9 threat, 1/1/3, 4 health. He's a Sylvan. Combat action, play a Sylvan ally from your hand. You do not need a resource match for this ally. Limit once per round. So you can play Sylvan allies without a resource match, but only during the combat phase. He's not a bad defender. It's been a while since we've seen anything for the Sylvan synergy. Does this hero improve the Sylvan deck? Sylvans I enjoyed playing at the time when Celeborn came out, but I found that they fell off. And the reason is because the requirements for an elite deck sort of escalated as the game went along. So here are the things I look for in a really elite deck. I look for resource generation. I look for card draw. I look for the ability to defend multiple times per round for 4. And I look for the ability to attack multiple times per round for 4. The Outland Swarm deck that I play is capable of doing all those things once set up. You get resource generation at the beginning of the game with Denethor, then you get resource generation with a variety of events and Steward of Gondor. You get card draw with Eristor. You can attack for 4 multiple times once you get 3 Knights of the Swan out, and you can defend for 4 multiple times once you get 3 Warriors of Lossarnach out. There are other decks that are capable of doing this as well. The Elrond Vilya 1 deck that was built by C-Stan to defeat every single quest in the game. It uses Arwen and Steward of Gondor for resource generation. It uses Elven Light for card draw, along with Elrond and Vilya for card draw and cost reduction. So multiple ways to do cost reduction with Vilya and Arwen and Steward of Gondor, and multiple ways to do card draw with Elven Light and Elrond Vilya. And then combat is handled by a variety of allies, as well as Eowyn, who can attack twice in one turn for 10, along with the ally Bjorn, Glorfindel. That's not quite attacking for 4 per round every round, but it's really close, and there's a wide variety of cards with beneficial effects to make up for what I would consider a small deficiency in attacking or defending. And the reason for the small deficiency is unwillingness, I think, to include a lot of attachments, which would degrade the value of blind Vilyas, because a Vilya deck wants to have every card be useful and impactful in case you don't have a Maldris Stargazer. But in any case, every deck that I look at, that's what I'm looking for. Whether it's something I build or something I see somebody else built. If I'm looking for an elite deck, I'm looking for the ability to attack for 4 multiple times per round, defend for 4 multiple times per round, and I'm looking for card draw, and I'm looking for resources. So, does the Sylvan deck accomplish this? Well, Celeborn gives allies, Sylvan allies, +1 willpower, +1 attack, and +1 shields until the end of the round. But only until the end of the round, and that makes it very difficult to attack for 4 multiple times per round past the round when the allies enter play. You can do it with Marksman of Lorien, which attacks for 3, but it only attacks for more than 3, or functionally more than 3. It reduces shields by 2 of an enemy on the round that it enters play, but not after that. So you'd have to cycle it in and out of play repeatedly in order to get the benefits. And previous to this, Sylvans couldn't do that effectively. You could cycle things in and out of play sometimes, but not always. So in terms of being able to attack for 4 every round multiple times, could Sylvans do it? No. They could not before this. Could they defend for 4 multiple times every round? Well, Thranduil could if he was buffed by 1 shields and then given action advantage. Previously, no. Sylvans were kind of weak on defense, and that's one of the reasons they fell out of favor with me. is that they're not particularly good defenders and therefore made it difficult to stabilize the board against difficult quests. So in order to make Sylvans playable, I think you need defensive buffs for Thranduil and action advantage buffs for Thranduil. You need the ability to cycle allies in and out of play quite a lot, which the deck is designed to do anyway. Then we need to handle resource generation and card draw, and that's a problem because it's not inherent to the Sylvan heroes. The typical heroes that you run for a Sylvan deck are Celeborn, Galadriel, and Thranduil, and none of them provide any additional resource generation, which means that you have to go outside of the heroes to provide it. Steward of Gondor is a given, but typically you need, or I like to have, two methods of resource generation. One is Steward of Gondor and one other to make an elite deck, and there are no others for the Sylvans unless you run resource events like gaining strength, possibly ranger provisions, possibly, I tried out in my Sylvan deck earlier in the game's life, I tried out Tighten Our Belts, yeah. So you need something like that to generate resources, and then for card draw you've got Galadriel, and she can do a good job of drawing cards if you don't quest with her, or don't have Nenya out. And also you can use a card combo like Mirror of Galadriel and Silver Lamp, and that's very effective card draw. The problem is, if you're using attachments for defensive buffs for Thranduil, for action advantage for Thranduil, although there's some action advantage innate, like the Elven King, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Ninth Guide can help with that, but you can't help you defend for multiple attacks. And we're doing some action advantage, and we're doing resource generation, and we're doing attachments to make card draw work. That's a lot of extra cards, and my feeling is if you're trying to do that and include all the Sylvan allies and cycling Sylvan cards, you're going to run out of card spots and have to compromise on something. And when you compromise on something, you're going to end up being short in one of the roles, either attacking, defending, card draw, or resources. And therefore my feeling is Sylvans are not likely to be an elite deck. Elite meaning the type of deck that will defeat the Battle of Cairn Doom, Mount Doom, some of the other quests that are among the hardest in the game, the Nightmare quests, etc. Not likely from the Sylvans, because I think their base synergy capability, their base stats, the concept of the deck is a little on the weak side, though it's a lot of fun. But a little on the weak side when it comes to defeating very elite quests. What would make it better? Resource generation, frankly, on one of the heroes. Olorian helps with that, but it is an attachment. When it comes to cards, attachments that you use for something like that, you don't want to be fulfilling every role of the deck or needing to augment every role of the deck through attachments. For example, when I play the Outland Swarm deck, Aristor needs no attachment to handle card draw. He just handles it without any need to do anything to him or set up any condition or buff him or anything like that. So when you look at the Sylvan deck and you think, well, with Olorian the resource and Steward the resource generation should be fine. Yeah, but those are attachments, those are card slots that need to be occupied, those are cards you need to draw and therefore won't draw them every time when you want them. Whereas a card that has it built in, like Aristor, just handles the card draw all on his own. In the Elrond Vilya deck, yeah, Vilya is an attachment that you need to draw, but when you do draw it, it handles two roles in one. It handles resource generation or cost reduction, which I consider functionally equivalent, and it handles card draw all at once. So that's acceptable. Yes, we need to draw the attachment, but it handles 2 rolls when you do draw it. So needing to draw attachments for every roll in the Sylvan deck, Lorien, possibly Mirror of Galadriel and Silver Lamp, possibly defensive buffs for Thranduil, action advantage, and cycling cards to take advantage of attacks with buffed attack thanks to Celeborn. None of these happen innately. The heroes are almost good enough to handle some of these roles. Defense, namely, Galadriel provides some card draw, but you might as well reduce her willpower to 0 when you do it. But they're not quite good enough to make an elite deck, in my opinion, but they will make a very fun deck that is almost elite and should be sufficient to defeat some of the quests, at least the normal quests, in the cycle. And Thranduil does help. He's a good card, but not an elite one. The Elven King, 1 cost attached to a Sylvan hero. Exhaust the Elven King and return a Sylvan ally you control to your hand to ready attached hero. So this is once again addressing one of the weaknesses I talked about, which is the need for action advantage, so Thranduil can defend multiple attacks in the same turn. And also, it allows you to cycle in and out of play a combat card like the Marksman of Lorien, which gives an enemy -2 shields until the end of the round on a turn that it enters play, and with Celeborn's buff can also attack for 4. So the Elven King will really help with that. These 2 cards, Thranduil and Elven King, they do make up a lot of ground that Sylvans were missing. They don't turn it into an elite deck, because an elite deck needs either some of the functions that you need, card draw, resource generation, attack, defense, it needs it to be built into the card. Like, for example, Baragon has the capability of defending 1 attack for 4 built into him. Grimbjorn the Old almost has the ability to attack for 4 and defend for 4. With 1 buff of a card that does 1 attack and 1 shield, he can. Bjorn attacks for 5, just built in. Quick Beam attacks for 5, just built in. Cards like Arwen can generate resources all on their own without any assistance, although you do need cards to discard. But she can discard duplicates, and then if you draw Elven Light, you can provide additional resource generation or card draw each round. So that's what I'm talking about when I say the Sylvans need something like that built into them. Thranduil's ability, while useful, doesn't fulfill any of the crucial roles. Galadriel's ability with Nenya, while useful, doesn't fulfill any of the crucial roles, but it does provide action advantage in terms of allies not needing to commit to the quest during the round they enter play, which is helpful. And Celeborn helps a little in terms of fulfilling crucial roles, but only on a temporary basis. So, Sylvan's not quite there in terms of an elite deck, in my opinion. But very fun to play, and close to elite. And these 2 cards help make up ground quite a bit. The Thranduil and the Elven King. Orcrist. 1 cost, guarded attachment. Attached to a hero, restricted. Attached hero gets +2 attack. After attached hero destroys an enemy, add 1 resource to attached hero's pool. Exactly the same review as the guarded attachments that have come before. It's very good. However, it's not good in the early game because you almost never want to, in solo play, add an additional enemy or location to the staging area. It's just not something that solo decks can really handle against a lot of quests. Got enough on our hands handling the cards that the encounter deck throws at us without adding any additional challenges. So this is a card for a stable board state, and once you've got a stable board state, you really don't need the card that much anymore. So it's like a win more, or a thematic, or a style card, but not a good one in true solo because of its early game weakness, early game uselessness even. And if you play 3 copies of this, 2 of them may be useless in the late game as well because they'll be duplicates. Unless one gets discarded. Forest Road Traveler. Forest Road Traveler gets +1/+1 and +1 for each attachment on the active location. 2 cost, 1/1/1, 2 health. Well, that's going to vary wildly from turn to turn in terms of how useful it is. Some turns it's going to be great if you got 2 or 3 attachments on there, and that's going to happen almost every game if you're playing the Haldan Attachments deck. So he'll be at 4, like 4/4/4 for his stats some turns, and then a lot of turns he'll be at 1/1/1. Probably the majority, the overwhelming majority, he'll be at 1/1/1, and that's bad. In order for this to be a good card, you'd have to have, on average, an attachment on the active location every round, and I don't think that's going to happen in most quests. It'll happen sometimes, but very inconsistently. So there'll be some turns when this card is phenomenal, and a lot of turns where it's just kind of not that good. An inconsistent card, a fun card, but an inconsistent card. Would I use it in the attachments deck? Yeah, maybe to try it out, but probably not. I'm thinking there's better uses for the card slot. Leather Boots, 1 cost, attached to a lore or ranger character, limit 1 per character. After a location is revealed from the encounter deck, exhaust Leather Boots to ready attached character. So we're providing attachment or action advantage for rangers or lore characters. Character, not a hero. Could be an ally as well. After a location is revealed from the encounter deck, well, the character in question would have to have been committed to the quest to take advantage of this. And you would have to commit him to the quest not knowing if you would have the opportunity to ready him again later, which means he'd have to not be an essential character for defending or attacking, because if he's essential, you can't risk not getting a location and therefore not being able to have the character ready for the essential role. He'd have to be kind of an extra character that you could not be super sad about if he wasn't ready. I find this similar to Forest Road Traveler. Good sometimes, bad sometimes, unreliable, difficult to take advantage of in any kind of optimal way. It could be good with a card that allows you to look at the top card of the deck, like Furial. Then you would know if a location was coming or not, and then you would plan accordingly. But you're talking about a multi-card combo to set up action advantage that will only happen sometimes. I don't think that's very good, and the reason it's not very good is it's probably not good by design, and the design is that way probably because this is off sphere. Typically action advantage comes from spirit, at least the most efficient ones. So this is unlikely to be a card. This is a card I'm unlikely to play. Leather Boots. Giant Bear, 5 costs, 0/4/3/4. Well, we just talked about the need for ways to attack multiple times per round for 4 and defend multiple times per round for 4. This does 3. The 4 attack, 3. So this needs to be 1 resource cheaper, and then it'd be a phenomenal card in nearly every deck. As it is, nearly every deck where you have access to tactics, that is. It can't have attachments, so you can't improve its defense. But 4 attack, and you can ready it at the end of the phase in which you trigger this effect, shuffle Giant Bear back into your deck. This is a great card if you have any kind of cost reduction that affects creatures or Bjornings. And there is a hero coming later that really works well with creatures. And I suspect this card would work very well in a deck containing him. Outside of that, this is a card that is almost very, very good. It's difficult to play 5-cost tactics cards. You might need something like the Storm Comes or Elrond. I mean, this card would be phenomenal in a Villia deck. I think I will include 3 of it in my Villia deck that I played early in this cycle. Well, I don't know if I will. The combat's already handled by Grimbjorn the Old. But if I wanted to swap out Grimbjorn the Old for another hero, like, for example, Tactics Eowyn, and then include Giant Bears to handle the combat role that Grimbjorn the Old previously held, I would consider that still a very, very good deck. Very strong. So I like this card a lot with cost reduction. Outside of cost reduction, it's a tough card to play. It's not going to come into play until the end game because Tactics doesn't have a lot of resource generation, and you're not going to want to save up 5 turns very often, or it's going to take a long time to do. It's not going to impact the early game too much. But with cost reduction, it's a great card, and I expected to see some play in some elite decks for that reason. Outmatched, 1 cost. Play into your play area unattached. Have you seen that before? If unattached, attach to the next eligible enemy that engages you. After attached enemy resolves its attack, ready the defending character. That's a complicated way to gain action advantage. It's a trap, so it works with Damrod. That's the only scenario in which I could see playing this card. It's a complicated way to gain action advantage. You know, it's curious, in the design of this game, sometimes the developers treat action advantages as something that's very cheap, and sometimes they treat it as something that's very expensive. Like Unexpected Courage is 2 cost and a card for action advantage guaranteed every round. This card is 1 cost for a card and action advantage only when defending an attack, and only as long as the enemy is in play and attacking, which probably isn't going to be too long. Then you also have a card like Cram, which for 0 cost just readies a character once. I'd be inclined to use that before Outmatched if I didn't have Damrod, because it's guaranteed. You can use it in every situation, and you're not likely to get a lot of readies out of this Outmatched. It's possible in some situations you could, but my guess would be you get 1, maybe 2 out of it in most cases. So without Damrod, it doesn't really make sense. There are other ways to do this that are better. With Damrod, since the card replaces itself, I might consider it if I was running Tactics. I don't think I'd run Tactics just for this card, but if I was already, I would probably consider this in the Traps deck. Galleon. 0 cost, 0/0/0, 1 health. Well, can't get any worse stats than that. Cannot attack or defend, so he can only quest. After he enters play, he gets +1 willpower until the end of the round. So you get +1 plus another 1 thanks to Celeborn since he's Sylvan. So it's a 0 cost quest for 2. And he can enable Sylvan cycling effects, such as the Elven King. You could use him with the Elven King every round. I'd probably play him in a Sylvan deck for that, just to enable cycling effects. I don't think I'd run 3 of him, maybe 1 or 2. But he's got a use. I don't think he drastically improves the Sylvan deck, but he does smooth it out a little bit and make it more likely you can take advantage of their in-play, out-of-play effects every round. So he's got a function, smooths things out a bit in a Sylvan deck. I can't imagine playing him outside a Sylvan deck. A 1-time 0 cost 1 willpower card doesn't seem very good to me outside of Sylvans. Quicker Than Sight, 0 cost, return a Sylvan ally you control to your hand to cancel a shadow effect just triggered during combat. Yeah, that's useful. I don't know that it's a must include. It's been a while since I played Hasty Stroke. This is cheaper than Hasty Stroke and enables your Sylvan in and out of play effects. But canceling shadow effects is not necessary in every quest. Sometimes it is though, and in the event that you got nasty shadow effects and you're playing a Sylvan deck, I would definitely include this. I'd include it before Hasty Stroke, I think. I think it's a Hasty Stroke upgrade in a Sylvan deck. So that fulfills a role for sure. As does Galleon. That seems the theme of the spirit cards in this expansion, this adventure pack. Thalion. 4 cost, 2/2/2, 3 health. He's a neutral Dunedain. While there's at least one side quest in the victory display, ready Thalion at the beginning of the combat phase. While there are at least 3 side quests in the victory display, Thalion loses the ally card type, gains the hero card type, and the resource icons of each sphere on a side quest in the victory display. Well, that's amazing if you were running multiple side quests and could complete 3 with a reasonable amount of the time. Now that's pretty rare. So let's look at him as if typically you're only going to complete 1 side quest. For 4 cost you get 2/2/2/3 health, and you can ready him at the beginning of the combat phase. Would I play him in a deck in which I'm running side quests? Yeah, especially if I was playing Elrond Villia or some kind of other cost reduction for Dunedain. If I could reduce his cost down to 2, he'd be phenomenal. With 0 in an Elrond Villia deck, I think he's great. He's probably 1 of in an Elrond Villia deck if you're running side quests in that deck. Yeah, I like the card in that situation. I'd probably include him in an Elrond Villia deck if it runs side quests. Definitely in a Dunedain deck. He could be a very fun card in a side quest deck if you're able to reliably complete 3 side quests. That would take a long time, but he would gain significant power, additional resource generation. Cool card, I like it. It's got a use. So yet another adventure pack in this cycle that is quite good. We're 3 for 3. I think if you really like Sylvans, you'll like this adventure pack a lot. If you're not a Sylvan player though, I mean Giant Bear is definitely going to be quite good. Possibly even essential because you could use it to cover a weakness of a lot of different types of decks that don't attack well. If you had a little cost reduction for it. If you didn't have a little cost reduction for it, it's not an elite card, but it's still a card that could make a deck at least playable that had a significant combat weakness. But yeah, if you're not into Sylvans, that's really the only card you're looking for here. And whether it's worth getting the adventure pack just for that, If you're really into Dunedain or the side quest type deck, Thalion could be a good card for that. But that's more of a fun type of thing. But if you're an Elrond Villia player, I think Giant Bear and Thalion are potentially quite good for that deck. I don't know if I'd recommend getting the adventure pack just for that though. You could get away with other cards. But I like the adventure pack overall. So thanks for watching.